Good morning, everyone. I see it's the top of the hour, and I thank you so much for joining us and setting aside some time today to join our discussion with some of the key leaders in the community effort to convert demography from subscription to open access. I'm Celeste Feather, the Senior Director of Content and Scholarly Communication Initiatives here at LYRASIS. We're really glad to be partnering with Duke University Press and the Population Association of America in this effort, because I think their efforts to convert demography to open access are opening up some exciting new avenues for us all to explore. Demography is a highly cited journal, receiving on average over 8,000 citations a year, and usage data shows widespread use across many types of subscribing institutions. This partnership was formally launched on September 8th, and we've all received a lot of questions about it, so we thought getting together now for a conversation would be really useful and helpful. I'm inspired by this work because even in the midst of a pandemic, we're reminded that it's still important to test and try and build momentum towards new models for scholarly content. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to share some thoughts with you first, and then ask them to address some follow-up questions so that we can hear more about their individual perspectives and experiences. So I'd like to start with some brief introductions to our panelists. Dean Smith is the director of Duke University Press. He brings a wide range of journal publishing experience to demography, working for commercial publishers, associations, and university presses. Dean's career path has taken him from Springer to the American Chemical Society to Project Muse at Johns Hopkins University Press, and then on to Cornell University Press, and now Duke University Press. Danielle Staudt joined the Population Association of America as its executive director in 2014. Prior to that date, she served as the executive director for the Association of Government Relations Professionals. Danielle's expertise in association management is further grounded through earlier positions at the National School Transportation Association and the United Motor Coach Association. Our third panelist is Robin Sinn, the coordinator of the Office of Scholarly Communication at the Sheridan Libraries of Johns Hopkins University. She started there in 2006 as a science librarian with strong interest in open access, authors' rights, and publishing models. Those interests led Robin to work on the Johns Hopkins open access policy, adopted in 2018, and then to her current role. She now focuses on evaluating the many new business models that support open publishing. So I'll ask Dean to start us off, followed by Danielle and then Robin. Dean, over to you.
Thank you, Celeste, and thank you, LYRASIS, for hosting us, my fellow panelists, Robin and Danielle, and all the attendees for your participation. I truly hope that all of you are healthy and safe during this pandemic, and that's really our first priority. I've been asked to give you some background and some context on how this all came to be, and I'm really honored to do so. Next slide, please. So here you see what I like to call the movable feast of Duke University Press publications. And I'll talk a little bit about the press very briefly. We publish bold, adventurous, and field-defining scholarship. Our publications are interdisciplinary, and many feature marginalized voices and groups. Black studies, feminist studies, indigenous studies, queer studies are core subject areas for us. Publish 150 books and 58 journals per year. Publications that really strive to make the world a better, more informed place. And we take that role very seriously. At the end of every fiscal year, we need to break even. That's one of our main drivers. Next slide, please. So last March, we were invited to submit a proposal for demography. And right away, we realized that we couldn't compete with the revenue the society was receiving from Springer Nature. And usually in that circumstance, we say, okay, we're gonna pass on this. And we had discussions about that. Then we thought about, what could we do? Well, we could offer a first-class publishing experience for the authors, for the editors, and for the libraries. We could be a great partner to this association, and we could drive global usage and discovery of this journal. And as the world was shutting down around us, and we were religiously monitoring the Johns Hopkins University coronavirus map, we decided to publish this journal because the world needed access to this information. We also decided to waive the author publishing charges because in talking to the editor-in-chief, there are potential contributors from countries like Bangladesh that would really like to not have any barriers for submission. So this was really in the moment that we made this decision. Next slide, please. Demography is a high-quality journal that is used heavily. It represents, really for us, multiple journals in terms of size. And articles on population statistics cover a wide range of subject areas. Duke University is a major contributor to this journal, and they are very excited about the fact that it is coming to Duke University Press. So you're looking at high usage, high impact, and high quality. This is really, we are so honored to be the publisher for demography. Next slide. So here's a sampling of articles that really gesture for us towards social justice. At the press, equity and inclusion are our core values. We embrace them as an anti-racist publisher, inside and out. What that means is internally we embody them, and in the publications that we bring to the world, they have those values as well. The research in this journal, we believe, will help drive positive change. And this just gives you a sense of really a random sampling of those articles. It could have come from the most recent issue. There are so many. This data, this research is so important to where we are now as a society. Next slide, please. So in talking about high impact, high quality, you look at the journal citation reports from the insights data, and it's the number 3 in the journal impact factor in demography at 3.080. But what's really interesting to me is the number of citations, 8,000 citations in 2019. That's not something you can regularly say about one journal. That's pretty extraordinary to me. And when I look at this data, I think about what are the possibilities if this journal is truly open? If we can really see the usage, the citations, and the impact factor even grow in this scenario. So that's the metrics are really good for this journal. Next slide, please. And here are the top 20 contributors by institution. You'll see some familiar players, some institutions you'd expect to be on this page, but also there's some international participation. And again, as an open access publication, how does this change? It's very exciting to me to think we're going to be getting submissions from other institutions as well, and perhaps even more of a global footprint for the journal. And we are in discussions with all of these institutions about participating in the model, about taking an institutional membership. Next slide, please. And that brings us over to the funding model. And we know there have been a lot of questions. And when you think about the compressed time frame that we had to construct this, this is not how things normally happen. You don't. And one of the things we talked about is if you sign the contract in June, how do you actually bring a journal like this to its audience in such a short time frame? Also, during the worst financial moment for libraries, for many institutions. And so we spoke with Oya Rieger, one of the founders of Archive at Cornell, and we followed the work of Alison Muddett and Sarah Rui at PLOS, spoke with several individuals about trying to create something that was really very simple, with the goal of wanting to have the conversations with you. We talk a lot at the press about the combination of transparency and inclusion equaling trust, and that's really what we're trying to build here. We are in it for the long haul. We have skin in the game. We are not maximizing profits. We are not paying shareholders. We will be engaging funders in the months ahead to lessen the burden on us and on libraries, and working very closely right now with Duke Library and talking about developing an open access endowment or publishing fund. So there's lots of excitement around what we are doing for this journal. And to me, it feels like the late 1990s again, where we're creating models, we're working together. It's about participation, it's about community. And we're looking to cover our costs. Next slide, please. So we've been doing at Duke University Press lots of experimentation and innovation around open access. And the benefits of working with the university press is you have what you saw in that very first slide. You saw the result of artisans, professionals, publishing professionals delivering really beautiful products, beautiful publications, supporting authors, certifying authors, doing a lot of the work of the academy. And that's what you're going to get with us. That's just what we do. It's not a really well-told story, and I think partly because we're too busy doing that work to kind of stand up and talk about it. But there's a lot of experimentation going on around open access, mainly because we believe that that's the way for this content to really be accessible in more than 200 countries. And where are the scholars of tomorrow going to get that research? So we participate in Tome, in Knowledge Unlatched. We have a growing list of open access journals that might lead actually someday to a bundle of these that we could present to you, so that it wasn't just one publication. Also, Project Euclid is a joint project between Duke University Press and Cornell University. And that content is 75% open access. And I don't know if many of you know that's even at Duke University Press. We want to ensure even long-term that this research stay within the scholarly communications ecosystem, within the universities. Is this model potentially replicable? We know there are the big deals and there are hundreds and thousands of these titles, but how many of them are like demography? Is it 200? Is it 250? So we're really starting to ask that question from an infrastructure perspective. Next slide, please. Yep. So we're seeking mainly to recreate some of the revenue streams that were there for the commercial publishing scenario, and we're doing that through institutional memberships and contributions, and attempting to do that. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the support, mainly to provide to honor our financial commitments to PAA. That's a top goal, to cover the journal's publishing costs. We would like to think about a small fund for innovation moving forward. We're not in this for the 5-year contract. We're in this for the 20 to 50 years. We want to publish this journal in perpetuity. So some of those funds will need to be looked at in terms of how does they factor into that long-term vision and goal to be the publisher of demography for a very long time. And two questions that I have is this is about, do you want to participate in making this journal open? Do you want to be part of this community? And what is the value of this research to your institution? Those are the kind of the questions that we are asking that are embedded within that model. It's really the start of a conversation. I'm available to speak with any one of you. You can reach out to me at any time. I know my licensing people are cringing right now, but that's how I've always worked. If you would like, there's an open line of communication directly to me. I want to hear your feedback, and we can move forward together. There are things I'm sure that we haven't captured in this short time frame in terms of constructing a model, and we want to hear from you. Next slide, please. So yeah, you see this graphic shows the different areas that we were looking into and exploring and pursuing for funding. We don't want it to all be on the libraries. We think that there's a role for university departments, research centers, funding bodies, individual donors. The association has already been an incredible partner in ways that I've never seen. So in talking about that community and being part of that community, we're having discussions that throughout my entire career have never happened. If you look at the panel, this isn't a common group of people that you find together. So, and we all have and share the same objectives. We welcome any level of financial support, but we will need support on an annual basis to meet our objectives. And thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you, Dean. Danielle.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Like Celeste said, I'm Danielle Staudt. I'm PAA's Executive Director. When this opportunity was presented to us, we were so excited. PAA's purpose is to promote and support population research, high quality population research. And what better way to do that than to move our journal to open access? Our members were beyond excited. The tweet where we announced it was our most engaged and popular tweet in the 5 years we've been on Twitter. It's been a really welcome move in our community. And for us, we see it as an opportunity to raise the profile of our field's work and to help more scholars become engaged in demographic research. We have researchers who come from a variety of fields, sociology, economics, and things like that. There's a lot of work in other fields that you could look at from a demographic lens, and with having more people have access to our research, that's much more likely to happen. And part of the consideration for PAA was, of course, there's a financial consideration. There's a cost to putting a journal together. Granted, there's reviewers who are volunteers, but you still have to pay your managing editors. You still have to pay your copywriters. It's not here's my paper and it gets published situation. And PAA is lucky in that our journal isn't a primary revenue driver. For us, that's our annual meeting. So this allowed us to be able to take our journal open access because we don't rely on demography's income to operate other aspects of our work. Other scientific societies or societies in general, they have a different model where their journals will support their mission critical activities that are simply cost centers, whether that's grant making or mentorship programs. In PAA's case, we have a really robust advocacy program where we educate federal policymakers about demographic research and about supporting our national statistical agencies like the census and things like that. Those efforts don't make money. They need to be supported somehow. But fortunately for us, that's not what we rely on for demography. It's very much a way for us to share the good work that our members do. We are, like I said, we're very excited about this opportunity. We've already seen some positive feedback from our managing editor and our editor-in-chief about how easy it is to work with Duke and how they feel a little bit more at home because it's the same sort of folks. You've got university people on the the editor-in-chief side and university folks in the press. So it was a really easy decision for PAA, and we're excited to be a part of developing a new model that hopefully will work for some other groups as well.
Great, thank you. Robin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robin from the Johns Hopkins Libraries. So we kind of jumped on board with this. I'd recently spent some time cleaning out my inbox so that things like the LYRASIS note would catch my attention when they came in, and it worked because I saw it. I was like, ooh, LYRASIS has some cool stuff going on here. So we did a little internal talking, and we wanted to support demography for a whole variety of reasons. The Johns Hopkins Libraries, we're very invested in moving to a more open ecosystem. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, so we're willing to participate in some new models and some pilots and things like that. Budgets being what they are, even in the time of COVID, it's still a time, as Dean was saying, to try new things. So as part of our movement towards a more open publishing ecosystem, what we're really keen to support are fully open efforts, university presses and societies that, as both Danielle and Dean have stated, share the mission and the values of the university and the libraries at the university. So it's the cool group that you want to be a part of, really. So all our boxes were ticked on almost everything I read in Celeste's first email about this. Added to that is the fact that trying to go platinum, I personally and several of my colleagues kind of think that APCs are another unsustainable road, kind of like subscriptions. It's just hard to budget for them. It's hard to guess how much it'll increase or things like that. So this being shooting for platinum is great. And of course, social justice and equity issues are also top of mind for everybody right now. And we really do want everybody to be able to submit to this very important journal. We also, even though we didn't make the top 10, Hopkins authors do publish in demography. We have a population center over on the medical campus. So again, this is kind of, if we're going to change how we support publishing and make it more about the publishing rather than the reading, if our authors are publishing somewhere, we need to support that as much as we used to support what they read and cite. So it's all having to think about things in a slightly different angle or perspective. So I think that covers everything I wanted to say right now.
Great. Thank you, all three of you. So let's move on to some more focused questions. And Dean, I'm going to start with you. You shared information about how the funding model works, but what kind of input did you seek from the various potential funding communities to help arrive at your final decisions to work with PAA and demography?
Well, you will recall that you were probably one of the first people I reached out to, along with Charla, in terms of I'd heard some of the things that you were doing about some of the things you were doing related to open access. So I wanted to you kind of initially gave me a sense of, this is viable. This is something we should pursue, that there may be some support. And, I think we still really want to get out to the entire ICULC community and make that. It will also give me a chance not to go up in front of ICULC with bad policies too, which that's happened before. But I'm a better person for it. I had some minimal conversations with some folks. There's some alumni who are involved in funding agencies, and they're waiting to see, once we have really coalesced the story, to advise us on where to go. And we talked to a couple who mostly were interested in funding open access monographs. So they haven't quite made it to journals yet or thought about journals. And so that's still in very initial stages. And so we have connections within the Duke Alumni Development Office who are interested in this and who will be looking at some of the bigger funding agencies for us.
Okay. Danielle, what has the impact been on PAA as an association as you moved from a commercial provider to a nonprofit university press provider?
There's a couple of positives. First, from our editor-in-chief and our managing editor's perspective, there's just less bureaucracy, and I think they feel that working with the university press, again, is like working with people who are like them, and they have sort of the same approaches to work. Also, it's a positive. Our missions are much more closely aligned. PAA does not exist to make money. We exist to serve our field. Duke is similar in that the Duke University Press, and they are there to support a mission as opposed to a profit. So we hope that with that approach, there's less, not incentives, not the right word. There's less of a desire to hit a certain number of pages every year. There's less of a desire to, say, you should have more articles that are smaller because that's better for the dollars. We're both focused on what is the best work that we can put out there. What is the highest quality population research that we can share with others? And I think our research as a whole in our community can only get better when our publisher and our society are aligned that way.
Okay. Interesting. So, Robin, over to you. Why should libraries consider funding one open access journal? And demography is an important one for sure, but it's hard to think about coupling together funds for this package and that package. There was one journal. Why should a library consider this?
Well, I think it's part of how everything is changing. the library as one of the groups in the system that has a bucket of money, which we are expected to disperse to benefit our communities, our faculty, and our students for their teaching and their research and their service, we need to consider how best to use that money so that everything aligns. Given that, again, it's just like, so if we're giving massive amounts of our budget away, well, not away, but we get something in return. If we're giving massive amounts of our budget to some of the large, big deals, that's a lot of money that goes to things that we don't really have a say about, the cable package analogy. They're in every big package we buy, it makes it maybe a little easier for our end of the work, one giant invoice or 4 giant invoices or something like that. But we also get a lot of stuff that our people don't use. And I'd rather spend money on things that I know our community will use and benefit from, both reading and citing and publishing in. And so, again, that's part of this shifting perspective. We have to think about making sure that journals and book publishers who want to do this to make things more open and equitable, we need to support that. So even if we don't get download counts or statistics like that, there are other stats we're going to come up with that will show this is useful, our faculty need it, our graduate students are benefiting. So even for a single, just because the journal is alone doesn't mean it's worse or better than being part of a set of 1,000.
Particularly one that's striking out on a different path that others might follow someday.
It should look tempting.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, Dane, Danielle in her opening remarks talked a little bit about the costs that need to be managed somehow to sustain a journal. And as we know, the concept of sustainability is present in every single conversation about scholarly publishing models these days. Clearly, you can't just rely on volunteer efforts. Can you talk a bit about the kind of analysis that's needed to discern the true costs and sustainability needs when publishing a journal? And my thinking is that this is particularly relevant in your space as a nonprofit provider. You're sort of boiling down to the essential ingredients.
So we have really expert folks in our journal production and publishing area who are very skilled in really hitting exactly to the amount that they project in terms of the cost. And one of the things is I was looking at some of the chat questions too, is that back in the 90s when we launched journals, we'd say we weren't even thinking about breaking even until after 5 years. So, and I think when you look at the P&L specifically for demography, this half-year amount is about $150,000, and then that goes up to $250,000 in the full years, out to year 5. And in preparation for this, we were able to, we knew the first year could be a challenge, so we set some resources aside, financial resources, to be able to cover that from our reserve. And we are looking at something that we feel is manageable, and that through the multiple channels that we are pursuing, we feel like we can get at those numbers. It's not a 7-figure number each year, which some of the other open access entities have to hit. And I feel confident that, but the big thing is like Case and Lindley, Rob Dilworth, Nancy Hoagland, and their staff, they've had experience similar to mine at other publishers such as Oxford University Press. So they really have this down to a science. They know every year a budget is a struggle for us. So, and we'll be doing this in January to find out where we're going to come out in June. And it's a 2-week, very arduous exercise every time where they're down to the dollar, because they know how important it is for us to hit our budget. And we believe we can make this work, and we believe that over time we will bring the funding people that we need, or bodies that we need to do this.
We have some follow-up questions that we'll get to later on about funding, but thanks for all of that information. I think people are interested in digging a little deeper into those details. So, Danielle, you talked, and we all know that open access increases readership for sure, but how do you think this move to open access for demography is going to impact the authorship and therefore the content of the journal?
I think that's that impact is one of the things we thought about, and we're so excited about it because we really think that allowing demography to be open access and easily accessible and relatively easy to publish in from a financial equity standpoint. Obviously, your research has to be good. We're not just going to publish anyone. It's the ability to broaden that base of authors, and not just from a perspective of, oh, now, I have this demographic research and I've been doing this forever and now I can publish in demography. It's more of getting more people into demography and looking at things through a demographic lens, using demographic methods, who aren't part of our community at this point. And we feel generally that the more people that are involved in our community and involved in demographic research, the better the research will be, which will hopefully then result in policymakers and others using that information to help people. That's our ultimate desire, is that the work our members do helps somebody make good decisions for a sizable group of people.
Robin, can you talk a bit about how you think libraries can justify redirecting subscription money to an open access journal when they could, of course, have their communities read it for no cost? And, I'd like to hear your thoughts about what kinds of strategies we need to develop and deploy in order to gather local funding support for open access.
That is the giant question on the library side of things. So I don't have any solid answers. I can tell you what we're trying to do. Because we know we're moving to open, because funders are moving to open, while we have an open access policy, we have a new office on open source. We have the COVID map. So while there hasn't been a mandate from the presidents or the provost level, they're involved in a lot that indicates moving to open is going to be important. So we're trying to do that. So we are privileged because we have a pretty, even after COVID cuts and things like that, we have a pretty big bucket of money that we have enough wiggle room to do some of this experimentation, and it may not be so easy at smaller institutions. But again, it comes back down to your primary mission and your values. And our mission is to make sure that the faculty have what they need to do their research and their teaching. And I and some colleagues are on a listening tour to hear what the faculty are thinking about now with all of these open access and other kinds of questions around publishing in the air. People are starting to think about tenure and promotion and the rewards system that often forces you to publish in a certain area, and maybe they don't want to anymore. So how do we help them change that? We also have to think about the faculty are also telling us that they're really worried about the societies that they're members of that are part of larger publishing systems. So it's like, well, if you cancel everything with big deal Y, which we are not thinking of doing, what happens to my society journal? Will I be left out in the cold? So there need to be some really in-depth discussions as we move our system, the library's budget, to funding where our people publish and also where they read and cite. And it's probably going to be a little more expensive than it is now. And then that means going back up the chain to say, all right, things are changing. We need more money in order to support the faculty. How are we going to do this? Do we need to work with the funders as well? Things like that. So it's a big question mark right now, but it's an interesting question mark.
Lots of community engagement work to do. I'm finding for sure. I think this has been great, and we do need to wrap up here, but I think the fact that all of these players are physically together on this call at the same time is a huge positive win and a signal of how passionately people care about the issues that we discussed here today. And it is especially great to have someone from the association, Danielle, being part of this conversation too. The key, I think, is that we all have to sit around the table and talk with each other, and this is a great start.